This is Lee Ellis with another installment of Leading with Honor Coaching. Well, you know, last month we started a session on talking about our core identity. And I mentioned that my identity as a young man was to be a fighter pilot, and that's what I was, and that seemed quite adequate. And then one day it wasn't, because you see, I was shot down and captured over North Vietnam, and that started 5.5 years of being a POW. And so being a fighter pilot wasn't much good as a POW. In fact, it was more trouble than it was worth there for a while. So I had to come to grips with, who am I? What is my core identity? And over that period of time, I really clarified it, but immediately I had to clarify who I was and what I was going to stand for in terms of my resistance to the enemy's attempts at exploitation. So I had to go to, what are my commitments? What is my character going to be? How am I going to stand up here? And really, it was going to take courage to do all that. So I learned a lot about the core there, and we saw this in each other and all the POWs, that courage was so important for keeping our commitments and guarding our character. So I think that courage, character, and commitment are very central to that. Of course, one of the things that I fell back on first was my spiritual identity. My spiritual core was very important to me because that helps define our belief systems of who we are, what our purpose is, what we stand for, what our values are. So that was very important. So those things, I think, really govern our core identity. And then the other parts of our identity flow from that, whether it's we're a fighter pilot or, a fireman or whatever. Well, now we're hitting the election season, and this really comes to my mind because politicians so often are confusing us about their identity. They talk about they're going to do this or that, or they're for this or against that, but then they get elected, and what we see is another person, another position. In fact, I was watching one talk show one evening, and one of the commentators said, well, this person will never be elected with that position. They'll need to change their position to get elected. And I'm thinking, okay, so this person who said they believe this and stand for this now should change their position so they can get elected. It's kind of the end justifies the means mentality. And we see that so much in our politics. Now, this is very concerning for me, and I'm sure it is for you too. So as we approach the political season and you're about to cast your vote, I hope that you'll look for people who keep their word, do what they say, have a track record of being courageous enough to live by their core identity, so that once they're elected, we will still see that same person standing for what they said they would stand for. That's what we need. Unfortunately, the approval rating for our National Congress, our senators, congressmen, people in Washington, hovers around 17% for a good many years now. That tells you how much we trust our politicians. I think being a politician's got to be a very difficult job. The temptations, I think, are so great to look good, to get elected, to get back in power, to get in power, to be retained, to get what you want, to get your ideology in place. All those things are great temptations. One state has 4 governors that have gone to prison. And if you look up mayors in jail, the list is astounding. So there's something about this particular profession that carries so much more temptation, and it's much harder, I think, to maintain your core identity. So I just want politicians and each one of us to battle for our core identity. When I came home from the POW camps, one of the things that was so important to me was the word honor. I wanted to live with honor. I wanted to honor my commitments to the code of conduct. I wanted to honor the commitments to my fellow POWs, to my country, to my family. Honoring was so important, to live in a way that would do that. And that core identity was something I had to fight for every day during my time as a POW to maintain it. But the reality is we have to fight every day of our lives to maintain our core identity, our values, our belief system, our purpose, our character. those things are not easy to maintain. And so that's the battle. And that's the battle that I want to invite each one of us to engage in daily, to be the person that we know we want to be, that we should be, that we've made commitments to be. To engage in that battle, it'll take other people helping us, encouraging us, and holding us accountable, but we can do it. We can do better. Well, as I said, that word honor is so important to me, but I battle for it every day. It's not easy, and some days I fall short. And then I have to apologize and try to learn from that mistake and move on. You know, as we face so many young people coming into the workplace today, I'm not so sure they've seen much about core identity. What they've seen is a lot of people operating as though the end justifies the means. So I'm challenging you, adults out there, to set the example and to have conversations with these young folks about it. We have an honor code, and I want to encourage you to download it and use it. There are 7 statements about honor, about keeping your commitments, speaking truth, being true to your core. Take a look at it and sit down and talk with your people about it, or your children, and help them understand why this is so important. I hope you'll do that, and look forward to next month talking a little bit more about identity, and we'll move out to some of the outer circles of our identity and how those play an important role also. Well, thanks, and continue to lead with honor.